All right, welcome to this episode of the Joyful Scaling Podcast. Today we're talking about embracing discomfort, caring about others' opinions or not caring, and time management as a leader. That's the focus. And I'm joined by Olivia Vizachero. She's a former big law commercial litigator and criminal defense attorney who runs The Less Stress Lawyer, a boutique life coaching practice for lawyers. As a certified life coach, she works with lawyers who are over the overwhelm and want to live lives with less stress, more fulfillment by teaching them how to manage their mindset and make themselves and their well-being their top priority. She helps her clients learn how to, listen to this, manage their time, set boundaries, stop people pleasing, overcome perfectionism, take more action, become more intentional, achieve their goals, develop business consistently, improve their professional and personal relationships, and most importantly, feel better day in and day out. Olivia is the host of the Less Stress Lawyer podcast. And here's one last thing I have to say. She co-authored a pandemic anthology called Networked with 19 other women lawyers, and that hit #1 on Amazon's new release charts. And I can't wait to get my hands on this book. And it tells the story of how these 20 women in March of 2020 came together to create connections, cultivate community, and build businesses, even in the midst of that crazy global pandemic. So let's say hello to Olivia.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I am a big fan of yours. And I love it that, like me, you were in big law. You got the job that everybody in law school was looking for, but yet you left that behind to pursue coaching, as I did. So tell us about that transition for you.
I sure did. So not to give everyone the War and Peace version, but I knew I wanted to be a lawyer from a really young age. I was 8 years old and I decided I wanted to be a criminal defense attorney for the Italian mob. And I never really grew out of that,
That's pretty neat.
to be completely honest. And I set out to go to law school and become a criminal defense attorney. I ended up doing that, and I worked at a criminal defense firm full-time all throughout law school. I was an evening student, so I went to school at night and then worked full-time. And I learned probably what a lot of your listeners have probably figured out is that you can be really good at the skill or the trade, but not necessarily the best business owner. So I worked for a man who was a brilliant trial attorney and not the best law firm owner. And things were bumpy, payroll issues and cash flow problems and things like that. So I got a little spooked. I was single at the time. I lived on my own, still that way, but it really factored into my decision-making. So I decided to go out for on-campus interviews and try and give it a go, doing like the secure, responsible thing. And I ended up getting kind of a joke, mob joke, the offer I couldn't refuse from the best firm in the state of Michigan, which is where I lived at the time. And it was way more money than I would have ever made doing criminal defense work at the firm I had been at, and really way more money. It was after a round of raises, kind of following some of the New York firms. So it was about $50,000 more a year than what other law firms, comparable firms were paying in Michigan. So I started to see stars and prestige and all of that. So I ended up going to work there. I summered there, and then I went back full time after I took the bar. And pretty immediately, I knew I had made the wrong choice. Like, it wasn't the right environment for me. It felt really unaligned with what I wanted to do. And I had really felt like I had abandoned my dream. And I decided I wanted to go back and do criminal defense, but I always think that like entrepreneurs are just a little bit delusional. And I think you have to be that way in order to like buck the system and say no to practicality and take the risk. Right.
Love that.
So I was delusional. I was working 80 hours a week at a big law job. And then my idea was to go back and work 80 hours a week where I used to practice law. But in the meantime, to start a business, now that I've done that, I know what it actually requires. But at the time, my idea was to start a business, a quote unquote side hustle, and to get that off the ground in order to bankroll my lifestyle and enable me to go back and work for my former boss, but not depend on him for money. And I just started binging everything I possibly could about entrepreneurship and starting a business. And I don't know if this is true for you. It's one of the things that I've seen pretty consistently with a lot of former lawyers turned entrepreneurs. I always ask them, like, how did you find your next thing?
Yeah.
And a lot of people just stumble into it. And that was my thing. I watch a lot of attorneys, especially, just like sit around and rack their brain for what am I going to do next? And I'm like, it's probably not up there. You got to go out into the world and do some research, learn some stuff, right? So that was me. I started listening to interviews with entrepreneurs, and one of them had a very similar story to me, like sold out for corporate America, kind of gave up her vision, and she ended up working with a life coach. And I had never heard that phrase before. So she had worked with a coach and basically had the exact trajectory I was looking to have. She quit her job, she started her own business, was making 7 figures, and really fell in love with her life rather than like going through the motions and sort of just tolerating it. So I looked into coaching, and she had turned me on to her coach's podcast, the Life Coach School podcast with Brooke Castillo, of course.
Mhm.
And it was like the first episode I listened to, Brooke recorded for me. It was all about how everything you have in your life is the result of a choice you've made, and probably a choice you keep making if it's still in your life. And
Mhm.
at the time, I was really in a state of victimhood and blaming people around me for forcing me to take this big law job. That's very much how I felt at the time, and the narrative that I was sort of indulging in. And Brooke kind of smacked me across the face and was like, you chose that job. Sorry to tell you that, but you did. And I was like, no, I didn't. She's like, you did. And also, you keep choosing it every single day. You should
Mm.
really explore why.
Ooh, yes.
And I did. I took her up on that inquiry, and I took a deep look internally, and I realized I cared more about other people's opinions of my decisions than I cared about trusting my gut and making myself happy. And that is a surefire way to be miserable and really unfulfilled. So I don't know that I had the verbiage at the time that I would have called myself this, but I learned that I was a people pleaser. And I learned that that is a way that I receive like validation and praise in the world, and kind of get the pat on the back, the atta girls, and that I loved that. I also listened to Tony Robbins' podcast episode, or his TED talk at the time, about the 6 basic human needs.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them is the need to feel needed, or the need to feel significant. And I could really see how that was driving me as a people pleaser in so many different areas of my life. So I dove into coaching. I was like, wow, sounds like I could really use this. And once I started to learn all of the different tools that you learn through life coaching, I started to look around. Not only was my life changing rapidly in a positive trajectory, I realized everyone around me was pretty unhappy and was suffering in ways that coaching really helps you resolve. So I felt really called to help people. It sounds so cheesy, but I felt like I found the secret to the universe, and I wanted to share it with people. So I got certified and quit big law and started my own business shortly thereafter, and I've been coaching ever since.
Yes, such a good story. And for me, it's interesting because you asked if I'm similar. I come from poor stock. Like I had these big dreams, but I didn't really think people like me could go to law school until I finally
Okay.
one day decided to do it. But I had to leave the practice of law to take care of my kids. But within weeks, I'm like, wait a minute, I love these kids, but I feel called to do something else. And so you'll find this funny probably. I just started a brand new business doing interior design with
Ooh.
zero training. I just had a knack for it and I loved it. And anyway, I had 10 clients within a couple of weeks because I was very intentional. Like lawyers were taught to win, strategically think to win. And
Yes.
anyway, so that was just a great ride. And there's been some, like you, some bobs and weaves until you finally realize this is what I'm called to do. But I have many coaches following, like hundreds and hundreds of them. But for anybody that doesn't understand some of these tools that can help you get clarity on what we're really put here on the earth to do, and even explore the awareness of your thoughts, can you just give like a thumbnail sketch on what really helped you to see what you before didn't even realize was there?
Yeah. So, really, just the framework. I think there's a couple universal truths. That's what I call them, at least. And once you start to learn them and they build upon each other, it really starts to give you a different lens that you can use to look at the world. So, the first big one for me was that circumstances are neutral. that the facts that you encounter don't have any emotional charge to them until you think a thought about them. And when I used to be someone who was pretty dramatic and like caught up in the story, and I think as an advocate, you really get taught to look at things through a particular viewpoint, and then you take that with you into the rest of your life, and it just becomes like the story you tell is the life you live, right? But learning the skill set to be able to separate the facts from the story that you're telling about them. And a really good example of this is an example I have from a former client. We were coaching one day and she came to the call. She was really upset. And she had gotten in an argument with her boyfriend at the time. And he was over her house on Sunday and he sighed. They were like in her living room together, hanging out. And he just goes, oh. And she made it mean all of these things. So we took a look. Like, that was the fact. He sighed. What did she make it mean? And she made it mean he hates spending time with me. He doesn't want to be here. He wants to leave. This relationship isn't going anywhere. We're probably going to break up. I'm never going to get married. Like, I'm going to be alone. Just the spiral, right?
Yeah.
And we started to examine it. I'm like, did he say any of those things? And she's like, well, no. I'm like, okay. Is there any chance it could be about anything other than what you're making it mean? And we started to pick it apart. And she's like, well, it was Sunday. He does family dinner with his family on Sunday. He doesn't have a great relationship with them. I'm like, what if maybe he was dreading leaving and, felt this obligation to go because it's just tradition, but he doesn't really want to, or he didn't really want to. And she was like, oh, yeah, it could have been that. It actually probably was that. And that's just an everyday small little example of these tools, right? Where you can separate the facts from the story that your brain's crafting around them and give it different meaning and choose what to think. It's sort of like choosing your own adventure. How do I want to feel? And knowing that you have the ability to control how you feel by curating the thoughts that you think, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's a big one. And then two other things came off of that. So you learn that facts are neutral and that your thoughts cause your feelings, which means you're in charge of your emotional experience, which is so empowering to be able to reclaim control, stop giving your power away to other people, control over your emotional experience, giving that away to other people. You reclaim all of that. But then it's like peeling back layers of the onion. It took me a couple months to realize, wait a second, I'm not a unicorn. If this is true for me, that my thoughts cause my feelings and that other people don't cause my feelings, it's me causing them myself, then that's true for other people. Their thoughts cause their feelings, not my actions. And as a people pleaser, that was what shifted for me. That was the permission slip that I needed to go live my life on my terms. So like when I chose to start my own business and leave Big Law, my parents thought I was, absolutely crazy. And they were very disapproving. They're very honest about it. They don't beat around the bush. They don't pretend to be supportive. They are now because I'm successful, right?
Yeah,
but at the time, they were really unhappy with my decision and they were outspoken about it. And I would have never, had I not learned that their thoughts cause their feelings and I'm not responsible for their feelings, I would have never been able to make that transition, that pivot, because I would have made myself responsible for them feeling disappointed. What is true is they did feel disappointed. I just didn't cause it. And when I could separate myself from their emotions and just let them have that emotional experience, I got control over my life back and I got to start living it the way I wanted to live it, which is so fun.
Yeah, so good. Oh my gosh, so good. All right. And if anyone's listening and you're like, what? Okay, that's like what I call my faith-fueled thought model. Like we got to identify those thoughts. That thought is leading to a feeling.
Yes.
And we get to choose our thoughts. We get to choose them. Hallelujah. We have the freedom. It's so good. All right. So I'm just curious, how did you come to niche down to work with lawyers?
I remember exactly where I was when I made that decision. Before I started my current business, I had an Instagram account called The Grown Up Guide. It's not active anymore. It still exists, but it's not active anymore. And I had the idea sort of before I really found coaching, I was going to teach people how to adult, basically. and help like the millennials transition from their college years into their career years and how to basically like get their stuff together.
Mm-hmm.
And I basically think that's coaching, by the way. I think that's life coaching. I just didn't have that terminology for it at the time.
Yep.
But I was torn between, do I keep doing that or do I work with lawyers? And obviously, like there's certain street cred. I was a lawyer. I understand the industry. I think that's I shouldn't say I think, I know that that is my clients, one of their favorite things about working with me. Very different than working with a therapist, right? Like just as helpful, if not more helpful, I think more helpful.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
also, like, I just know the shorthand. I know what trial prep requires. I know what drafting a motion for a particular hearing requires. They don't need to explain it to me. I understand why you might not want to enter your billable time, all of the reasons that you might not want to raise your rates, all the drama that goes into that. I've just lived it. So I'm able to relate to them so much more. And I had learned from a coach that you should niche, and I know people teach that. I know other people don't, but I was, sort of blindly following instruction because I was new to all of this. So I was thinking about, how do I want a niche? And lawyers just seemed like the really obvious choice. And I was on the phone with a girlfriend of mine. She's a coach as well. And I was like, Kelly, what should I do? Should I, do the adulting thing? Should I coach lawyers? Should I be more broad than that? Like, what should I do? And she just took a deep breath and she said so softly, she's like, can you just help the lawyers? They could really use your help. And it just felt so right for me. So I was like, yep, done.
Yeah.
And I've done it ever since.
And I love it. The less stressed lawyer, because I know when I was a lawyer, it was like, yeah, lawyers, they mostly become alcoholics. There's just too much pressure. There's just too much stress. So I think that's awesome. All right. So we have an audience of entrepreneurs for the most part, or leaders maybe in corporate that are thinking about transitioning. So I really want to talk about embracing discomfort. For me, that word willing, what are you willing to feel to get what you want? So I would love you to kind of unpack that. Embracing discomfort. Why is that so important in entrepreneurship?
Totally. And I think this ties in with your model, right? So I had learned that like you can change your thoughts. And I was like, that is amazing. And it is amazing. And I practice it every single day in my life. But when I learned that concept, it was sort of the main concept that I learned. And I realized that sometimes our thoughts are really, really sticky. And I'll give an example of that in a second. But I learned that sometimes your thoughts are really, really sticky. So that can't be the only solution to creating the life that you want. Also, learning that the currency to having the life you want, a lot of it is uncomfortable because you're doing things for the first time. They're new, they're foreign to you, they're unfamiliar. So I had heard of a quote from a coach of mine where it was like, if there's no feeling you're unwilling to feel, there's no result you can't create. And I thought intellectually, like I understood that. And I kept telling myself that all the time. I'd like walk around my house. I'm like, there's no feeling I'm unwilling to feel. There's no feeling I'm unwilling to feel. I'm willing to feel all of the feelings. And then finally, I kind of called BS on myself. I'm like, is that actually true? Are you willing to feel all of the feelings? And I went back to the quote, if there's no feeling you're unwilling to feel, there's no result you can't create. So I started to audit my life. And I looked at, where don't I have the results that I want? And there were a couple very clear areas at the time. So one was in my business. I had the idea to start my coaching business, but I hadn't gotten it off the ground yet. And the second at the time was weight loss. I was someone who used to overdrink as an attorney and had bad eating habits and just all of the coping mechanisms. I also used to take Adderall to overwork, and I started to quit all of that. But as I did, I used to smoke as well, all the buffers basically. And as I eliminated those from my life, I gained a ton of weight. And those were the two main areas. So my business and then like my food, my relationship with food, that I didn't have the results that I wanted. So I just asked myself, well, what emotions am I not willing to feel? There must be some feelings I'm not willing to feel. And I started to make a list. And I actually teach a concept with my clients. I call it making an allowance list. And it's the emotions that you have to be willing to feel in order to get the results you want. And it's normally not just one feeling. Normally it's a whole fun cocktail grab bag of negative emotions. So with food, in my relationship with food and in my weight loss journey, I was unwilling to feel deprived and bored. And if I was just willing and allowed myself to feel those feelings, everything changes, right? I kept telling myself, and this is where like the thought errors and the mindset comes into also the allowance of emotions, because the thought that I kept thinking was, I just wish food was easy. I just wish food was easy. I just wish food was easy. And then I called myself on it. I was like, no, you don't. You wish food is entertaining or would be entertaining, which is why you eat the way that you eat.
Ooh, wow.
I was like, food gets real easy when you eat the same stuff every single day. And then so this is a really good way for your listeners to figure out what specific flavors of negative emotion am I avoiding. How I do this is I look at the action I would need to take. What's the intentional action that I would need to take to produce my desired result? So I would need to eat foods that support my weight loss and only eat that and not eat off plan, right? So when I asked myself, if I forced myself to do that, how would I be forced to feel? And I identified these two emotions, bored and deprived. And I was like, okay, that's the currency to the result that I want. I have to be willing to embrace this discomfort. And then I did the same thing with business. At the time, I wasn't marketing. I wasn't putting myself out there on social media. And I got certified as a coach in 2018. So this was towards the end of 2019, early, weeks of 2020. And a lot of people that I had been certified with were making money. And they were posting about it publicly in some coaching communities I was a part of. So I was starting to compare and despair and just see them outpace me and move forward. And I thought to myself, why are they ahead? I don't understand why they're ahead. And I sort of did a little bit of an inventory. I'm like, they're not smarter than me. I don't need to say that I'm smarter than them, but let's just say we're all equally as smart, right?
Yeah.
They're not smarter than me. That's not it. And I bartended for years. So I think I'm pretty outgoing and charismatic. So I'm like, that's not it either. I'm not shy. I'm not introverted. It's not that they have a better personality than me. I'm vivacious and confident. So that's not it. What is it? And I went back to the same idea with the food. I'm like, I don't have the business results I want. I must not be willing to feel certain feelings. What might they be willing to feel that I'm not? And I thought about what are the actions I'm not taking. And I looked at what are the actions that they are taking that I'm not taking. And a lot of it was marketing on social media, creating posts, posting publicly, sharing thought leadership, teaching people things, putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
So I asked myself the same question. If I forced myself to do that, how would I be forced to feel? And 3 words came to mind: exposed, judged, and embarrassed in front of everyone I used to work with.
Okay.
And the truth is, what I've learned is there's always discomfort both ways. In not doing the thing that gets you the result that you want, and in doing the thing that gets you the result that you want, right? So at the time, when I left my last law firm, I left Big Law and I went back to work for my former boss for a little while. It was rocky, just like it was prior to going to Big Law. And I went a long time without getting paid and lived off of credit cards until that eventually ran out. And then he hired someone after not paying his staff for months. And I lost my mind as a result of that and confronted him about it. Yeah. I confronted him about it and was like, hey, I really don't feel like being your conscience, but you don't have the money to pay this kid. You got to tell him, I'm sorry, but I can't bring you on right now. And he said, I'm not going to do that. I'm doing this as a favor to a judge and it's the right decision. And I was like, for you, not me. I'm out. So I left and I had no savings, no plan. I mean, when I say I was broke, I was no nonsense broke. And there is a discomfort of being broke, one I really don't prefer. So I so clearly saw the choice at the time between you can avoid feeling exposed, embarrassed, and exposed, embarrassed, and judged, but that is uncomfortable because not having money is uncomfortable. or you can feel exposed, embarrassed, and judged and make some money. And I kind of joke with people now. I'm like, when you're choosing between two versions of discomfort, always pick the version that comes with money, or like always pick the version that gets you to the life that you want. So that's how I make decisions now. And I came up with, this is just, my clients like it. I think it's catchy, but I use the phrase to sort of sum up everything that I just explained, is that you have to gag and go through the discomfort. So you're going to feel nauseous. It's going to make you queasy. That isn't a reason to not move forward. You're just going to gag a little bit. You might vom, might feel like you're going to vom, but then you just move forward anyways and let it be there and be fine.
That's so good. And I can tell you that I just love that you went to that detail. So thank you for that. A lot of times my clients, they start to push forward and do things that feel new, and they may or may not get the result that they're thinking of. And then they turn that around to be, well, it's not God's plan for me. I misheard him. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Why do you think that?
Yes.
So again, it's like, it's just new. And let's evaluate what happened to see, maybe how we can make it better. But they immediately go to, I don't feel good.
Yes.
Or it must be wrong. But wait, don't trust your feelings. Like,
yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Correct. This is such a good point. I learned this in my 20s, and I leveraged this learning as I started and built this business. So I started several businesses in my 20s. I've been entrepreneurial my whole life. I started a personal assistant business. I started a business like promoting places in Detroit, a blog that I was planning to monetize, and a resource, sort of like Eater, but specifically for Detroit. And as I did those things, I normally chart out like this curve. So it's like, an x-axis and a y-axis, and you start out really high motivation. You feel confident and energized and excited and so committed. And then you start taking action, and you can chart the drop, right? So you start taking action and you don't get the result you want fast enough. And you start to feel a little confused, and then a little worried, and a little frustrated. And while you start to feel those feelings, you start showing up less and less, right? You start retreating, you start withdrawing, then you feel discouraged, and then you feel maybe embarrassed or inadequate. And eventually you get to a point where you feel defeated. And you've probably just about stopped showing up at that point, and that's when you quit. And for me, I used to jump to something new because that felt exciting and motivated and committed and like so delicious, right? So I realized I'm a jumper like that. And I think a lot of people use the term like shiny object syndrome to describe that. But you have to understand why you have shiny object syndrome. It's because you start to feel discomfort, and then you work to escape it by jumping to something that feels better. So I made a decision when I started this business. I've tested that doesn't work enough times to know it doesn't work. So with this business, I made myself a promise, actually 2 promises. I said, I'm actually no nonsense. I'm actually going to be willing to feel every negative emotion. I have to. As I grow this, as I learn to do this for the first time, I'm willing to feel it all. And the second promise I made to myself is, no matter what happens, I will not quit.
I love that. I will not quit. That's so good. Yeah. Thank you for that. The commitment, I always say it's a 2-step process. Like, it's the decision, but then you've got to stay committed. And so if you're not committed, you didn't really make a decision.
Yes.
It really wasn't a decision. So whether you say decision or promise, and I totally think that this entrepreneurial thing, there will be failure. That's just part of it. But I look at failure as, yay, let's go. Every time I fail, I learn, I grow. And
totally.
So another part of the willingness to feel. It was funny when you said about the jumping. That was for me in my years as a lawyer. Ooh, they're going to pay me more money. They're going to promise me that I won't get baloney when I want to stay home with my sick kid. Oh, I'm jumping over there. And then you get in there, there are the pains in the butt. Oh, I'm going to go over there. It's like, oh, yeah, so good. All right. I can't believe how quickly time's going, but I want to talk about time management.
Yeah.
Because I teach time blocking in a very specific way. And it is the basic rudiments of it is specific task, to specific time frame. And then the juice of that is actually committing to, there's that word again, fulfilling what you've just put down on the calendar.
Yes.
So they're like, but I time blocked, but I got distracted, or
Yes.
somebody came in. So I would love your take on time management, how you teach it, kind of what are the building blocks to really be in control of your time.
Totally. Now let's talk about a master class in embracing discomfort. Okay. Because it truly is. And I think a lot of people beat themselves up. I used to be one of these people for being bad with time management. And there are a couple of things I tell my clients. Number one, you're bad at it because you've never learned it. And not only have you not learned a system, you haven't learned the underlying skill set of discipline. And all discipline is working when you don't feel like it, and without fear being what's driving you, right? And most of us learn to work when fear is driving us. Clean your room or you're grounded. Study for the test or you'll fail. Do this assignment or you'll get fired. And as leaders, when you're in charge, or entrepreneurs, when you're making the rules, you're the disciplinarian now, and you can kind of decide whether I punish myself or not. So you really don't have the same fear, or the fear is so far removed that it doesn't outweigh the discomfort of doing the thing in the moment. So I teach people, if you struggle with this, it's because you've never learned to do it. And now for the first time in your life, you're going to learn how to build the skill of practicing discipline, of being disciplined in order to manage your time. So one of the things that I teach, the other thing that I want to mention, I think people underestimate what goes into time management. It is an emotional business. It brings in together so many different components. There are so many different skills that go into really being able to manage your time. You can't be a people pleaser and great at time management. You can't be someone who says yes all of the time and be someone who's good at time management. You can't be a perfectionist and be someone who's good at time management. So all of these emotional aspects are what prevent people from managing their time. So I teach a 3-step process. Number one, you've got to reclaim control of your calendar. That starts with just believing that you are in control of your time, that you're always making a choice. It's always your decision, whether you answer a call, whether you respond to an email, whether you say yes to a meeting, you're always in control. And that really ties in. We look at boundary setting. Where are you people pleasing? Where are you not making decisions about what you do when, right? Step 2 is you need to plan your schedule accurately. And I have a very thorough, it's simple, but it's thorough.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, those two things going together, but it's a 10-step process for how you plan your schedule accurately. And it starts with creating a to-do list, breaking things up by task, not by project, estimating how long the task will take, doubling it if you're bad at that, which most people are, picking start and stop times for when you're going to work, and then making sure all of your appointments are on your calendar so you have a clear representation of your availability, and then slotting in things from your to-do list and planning less than what fits. I really obsess over the math of time management. There's math and mind drama. We've got to make sure we get the math right. And a lot of people, I'm sure you see this because you're talking about the specific task in a slot of time, right? Is that most people, when they're not planning that meticulously, they're trying to shove 20 hours worth of work into an 8-hour time period. And I hate to tell people this, they don't love hearing it from me, but you won't win that battle. Time will win every day of the week and twice on Sunday. So your expectations of what you can accomplish in 8 hours, that has to be what changes. Time's not going to change. So you've got to make the plan. And then, that's the easy part, frankly. It requires some self-discipline to even go through that process, but that is the easy part. And I work with a lot of people who make the plan and then the plan goes out the window and they don't follow it at all. So step 3 is honoring your plan.
Yes.
And this is the part where we have to embrace discomfort. So there's a couple different things that I teach here. Number one, I just like to simplify it for people. I really love rules of 3. That's an old trial attorney trick. Tell them what you're going to tell them again, or use 3 examples to underscore a point. So I use that a lot in my teaching. And for honoring your plan, there's 3 things you have to do. And it's pretty simple, uncomfortable as all get out, but simple. You got to start on time. You got to work without interruptions, and you've got to end on time. And as you make your plan and you go through your day and you don't honor your plan, which you have to be willing to let this be messy. You're not going to do it perfectly. And you have to commit to 1% improvements every day. You also have to evaluate. You have to learn what didn't work, what did, and what you'll do differently. So you want to specifically look at these things. So this is what I teach people to evaluate for. Did I start on time? Did I work without interruptions? Did I end on time? Did I reshuffle my schedule? Normally that's coming from people pleasing or the desire to avoid feeling guilty, worried, or afraid. Did I plan inaccurately? Did I try and shove 10 pounds of potatoes into a 5-pound bag? Did I underestimate how long something was going to take? And then the third one is, did I procrastinate? And for each of those 6 things, really, start on time, work without interruptions, end on time, reshuffle, plan inaccurately, procrastinate, I want you to start looking at, why did I do those things through the lens of what negative thoughts was I thinking and what negative feelings was I unwilling to feel. And if you do that, it is tedious work. I get that. But if you study yourself to that level of specificity, you will master time management and absolutely change your life.
So good. So good. That is so thoughtful. It's such a thoughtful approach to time management. So that's so interesting. We're going to talk about your freebie that ladies, you're going to have to grab, don't run, don't walk when we drop that below. But I laugh. I love, there's just a sisterhood that you're a lawyer, because when you say the time, it's like, that's exactly what it would be. I learned that when I had to write a motion or a brief, however long I thought it was going to be, I knew I'd have to double it. So this becomes the way you plan for things. That's so good.
Totally. And I love encouraging people. When I say I used to be bad at this, I can't begin to tell you how bad I was at this, at avoiding discomfort. I, sought instant pleasure and instant gratification and scrolling on social media and grabbing a glass of wine and grabbing a snack and buying stuff online in order to escape the discomfort of things. I'd start and stop and quit and be inconsistent. I would procrastinate. I, would overestimate how much I could get done. I was the worst with all of this stuff, which is why I think I'm such a great coach, because I understand deeply how people operate and what drives them.
Yep.
But if you commit, it didn't happen overnight. And my perfectionists out there, they want to wake up tomorrow and be amazing at time management. And man, if I had that wand, I'd be a billionaire right now. And I'd give it to everyone. That'd be so amazing. But that I've learned it the hard way. That's not how you get better at this stuff. It is messy and clunky. And if you're a perfectionist, those words make you cringe. But if you commit to not beating yourself up and you just get curious with yourself and commit, like you said, there's that word again, commit to sticking with this until you get good. I'm just going to do this for however long it takes me to be good at it. You'll get there.
Yes. And I love the 1%. Hey, if you get 1% better every day, imagine where you're going to be in a month, a year. And I will tell you, and my clients know this, that for years, what I was unwilling to do or feel was the mindset. Look, I'm smart. I've done hard things, just mindset stuff, but let's go. But this is the crux of it. The way we think when we're doing things means everything. And to your point, we just talked about time blocking. If you have this negative thought, or how about sales? Right? Sales for entrepreneurs. Oh, I'm not a salesperson. Judy, do not call yourself whatever you like.
Yes.
But why don't you like sales? Oh, I'm salesy and pushy. Well, what does that even mean? Explore why, that question of why. So,
and that was another area where I had to make an allowance list. What are all the negative emotions I have to be willing to feel in order to have very honest conversations on consultations? And I made a long list: desperate, pushy, rude, inconsiderate, graspy, invasive, intrusive, offensive, impolite. Now, I don't actually feel those way that way or those ways when I'm on the consultation with someone. I feel so connected to them. I feel like I'm in service and I'm just helping them figure out whether they want to make a decision to work with me or not. But I had to be willing to feel those feelings. And I'm going to give you a law nerd example, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
I like to differentiate, this relates back to discomfort allowance, but there's two different types of emotions or experiences of negative emotions that you want to think through. One is you're actively feeling it. And one is it's on the horizon, but you haven't experienced it yet. So I always use people will have to bear with me. In torts in law school, you learn the difference between assault and battery, right? So in criminal law, it's the same thing. It's when you hit someone. But in civil law, so suing people for money, if someone winds their fist up and pulls it back and goes to hit you, but stops short, but you go, "Whoo!" and you were afraid because you thought they were going to hit you, that is an assault, right? And then if they wind up their fist, they pull it back and they smack you in the face, that is a battery. And what we say in law is that an assault is the apprehension of a battery. And I think about feeling negative emotions like that. So I like to categorize and classify. Is this like a battery? Like I actually have to feel it in the moment, right? So like posting on social media for me, I had to feel exposed. That was an emotion that I had to feel. Yeah. Feeling rude on a consult, I just had the apprehension that I was going to feel that. I didn't actually feel rude, right? Same thing with like, sometimes I don't actually feel deprived. Like I love some of the food that I eat now. It's delicious. I learned that I could eat healthy and lose weight. Yeah. So I might think that I'm going to feel deprived, but I actually don't feel deprived. So that's just a little trick. Normally we make a really long list of emotions we have an apprehension we're going to feel. And if you're like, I might not even have to feel that way. I might just have to decide right now that I'm willing to feel that way, but I probably won't even get there, which is helpful.
That is so good. I love how this is the way lawyers think. We get down to the granular.
Yes.
So appreciate that. You're so thoughtful. Yes. I love it. All right. So unfortunately, our time is up, but you have this amazing time management webinar that you are gifting our listeners. Tell us about that.
Yes. I'm agreeing with you. Run, don't walk to go watch this. It is one of the concepts that I've really brought into my business. And I'm sure you think this way. I'm sure a lot of your listeners think this way. I really appreciate someone's investment of time when they give me their attention. I realize that it's not free to them, especially I coach lawyers. Time is literally money to a lot of people. So I always strive, my goal every time I talk is I want it to be the most valuable use of your time. And I want you to walk away with that feeling. I've learned from a lot of people that when you teach something, you should go through, explain the problem, kind of vaguely talk about the solution, but like, don't really give them the how. And that is not how I teach. I don't like being taught that way. I don't appreciate when people do that to me. I want to leave a training and say, man, I can't believe how much I learned. I can't believe how valuable that was. So I've done webinars every single month for 4 years straight, which is a lot of content. I feel so strongly about this. This is the best webinar and most valuable training I've ever done. And I walk you through every single thing you need to do in order to learn how to manage your time. I teach you how to plan your schedule accurately. I go through my meticulous 10-step process for that. I talk about reclaiming control of your calendar. I talk about what you need to do to honor your plan. I talk about the mindset that you need to have in order to work through your issues with time management. It is so comprehensive. So it's a little over an hour long. I promise you it is worth every single minute. And it's fun to watch. I'm very interactive with the crowd. The way that it's set up, you can actually read the chat as the webinar is playing. So you'll feel like you're right there with me. And I think you'll learn a ton. It'll be super valuable.
That is awesome. All right. That will be in the show notes. So all these ladies that are falling in love with you right now, where is the best place for them to find you and connect?
Yes. So a couple different places. My website is thelessstresslawyer.com. It's pretty simple over there though. So if you want to soak up some of the goodness that I share content wise, follow me on LinkedIn under my name, Olivia Vizachero. I'm also on Instagram at the Less Stress Lawyer. I do these fun, anonymous Ask Me Anythings every weekend too. People have loved them. So it's sort of like a Dear Abby thing where you can submit your questions and follow along. So check me out over there. And then I also have a podcast of my own, the Less Stress Lawyer podcast. And people tell me, even if you're not a lawyer, it is still super valuable. I talk about time management and the long list of things that you mentioned that I teach on in your intro of me. I go into all of that in great detail there. And I give a lot of actionable tips and strategies in addition to the mindset.
Yes, absolutely. It is a wonderful podcast. You'll definitely want to check it out.
Thank you.
Olivia, thank you. This blows my mind, and I'm sure that the ladies listening, they're going to listen back again. So thank you so much for sharing so many pearls of wisdom.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thank you, ladies, for listening. If you have not yet left a rating and a review on Apple, please do so. We need to spread the word for miraculous results being normalized for Christian women, because God has us here for a purpose, and it's time we live our faith in that business and really do amazing things. All right. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.